Well, thank you, friends, for joining us on our third Thursday, which for this month is on the fourth Thursday. Tonight we have the joy of meeting with a friend and colleague of mine, Corey Schlosser-Hall, and I'll say a little bit more about him in a minute. Let's open with prayer. Let's pray. Oh, amazing, fantastic God. Thank you for surprises and joy. Thank you for possibility. Thank you for the ways your spirit trips us up sometimes or pushes us in a different way. Thank you for the ways that you are indeed making things new, that you are recreating your mercies new every morning. Thank you for being a God who, at the heart of who you are, creates. Invite us or remind us that you are always inviting us into those acts of creation and recreation, into the work of experimenting, trying, innovating, checking things out, being willing to venture from what is comfortable into what is possible. And be with us in this time as we hear about how our own denomination is committing to that kind of work, committing to following where the Spirit leads and learning new ways to be the body of Christ together. So open our ears, open our hearts, open our imaginations as we wonder about what you're up to in our midst. We ask this in your holy, life-giving, and often surprising name. Amen.
Amen.
So
Wow.
I have known Corey for a long time now. Long time. Because yeah, we've crossed paths a lot. Some of you may know my family has been in Washington State, which is where Corey lives. And so he and I have crossed paths when I've gone out to visit. And one time, gosh, 2018, I flew out and basically did a field trip. I shadowed Corey for a week because he was
It
serving
was
as
so great.
the executive presbyter for Northwest Coast Presbytery, which is a huge swath. People who think that Newcastle here has some geography, you have no idea. When Corey shared the news that he was being called into this newly developed position, it was one of those times that I said, God isn't done with us yet. Here we are, the
Oh, God bless you.
PCUSA and our Presbyterian Mission Agency created a position that is the director and now deputy executive director of vision, innovation, and rebuilding. And they invited somebody who I have experienced having those values at the core of who he is into this work. So I'm so thrilled to introduce you to Corey. For those of you who are coming to the Bay Retreat next week, oh my gosh, next week
Next Thursday.
is one of our leaders. So you'll get to experience his energy in person. So you have a lot to look forward to. Corey, I'm going to spotlight you and turn it over. Spotlight.
Nice. Hey, are you all able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Sound good? Sound clean? Great. Well, what a treat. I wonder, Cindy, would it be okay if I just asked each person to, just briefly 20 or 30 seconds or less, just introduce themselves and where they're serving or how they come to this gathering? Would you all be willing to do that? That would be really helpful. Great. Can we start with you, David?
Sure. David Wall. I'm the clerk of session at Cool Spring Presbyterian Church. Member about 6 years and an elder on the session for 5 years now, I think. and serving this small historic church in Lower Delaware.
Cool. And do you get the prize for the coolest church name?
Oh, yes. Cool Spring. It's named for a spring that runs right behind the church. And
Nice.
it's either Cool Spring is one word or cool and spring is two separate words, but you'll see it in historical documents spelled both ways. So it's
That's great.
cool.
Thanks, David. That's great. And how about S. Worsham?
That's me. I'm an elder at the Presbyterian Church of Easton, Maryland, and also hold a degree in theology from Princeton, and did a lot of work as an interim minister for youth in a lot of large congregations, and have always been very active in those churches in their mission work. So, and I'm on the worship committee here, and we just got done calling a new pastor. I was on the pastor nominating committee, and I'm tired and want to take a break.
Yeah, I get it. Wow, that's cool. Thank you.
But what is your name?
Scott.
Scott. Very good.
Scott,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Good call. Thanks, Nancy. And how about you, Nancy?
Okay, I'm Nancy Tucker, an elder at Concord Presbyterian Church. Been an elder for a long time in lots of different roles and staff relations right now. We will be going through a transition time, but our pastor, Steve Clark, has given us a year before he retires. So it's really nice to have him with us as we go through the process and do a lot of soul searching this year, which is why I am on this call.
Yeah, amen. Thanks, Nancy. And how about iPhone?
Oh, okay. I was wondering how I was showing up there. I'm assuming you mean me. I'm George Hall.
Yes.
Yeah, an elder at Community Presbyterian Church. I've been, I guess, working in the presbytery since 1973 or so. Born into the Presbyterian Church. I'm an elder, ruling elder, and I've served on quite a few committees on the presbytery. And I haven't done a lot of presbytery stuff since, I guess before COVID, maybe 3 or 4 years before that. And I'm currently on CORE for the Synod, Committee on Representation.
Gotcha. Good. Thanks, George. Good stuff. How about you, Gerald?
I'm a retired pastor. I am a member at large. I serve the presbytery on the Committee on Leadership.
Oh, nice. Thank you. And Marge?
I am an elder currently back on session at Concord Presbyterian with Nancy in North Wilmington. And I am co-chair of our mission committee and also co-chair with Nancy on our Afghan family resettlement project.
Wow. Well, thanks be to God for that. Thanks, Marge. How about you, Chelsea?
If you want some more soup.
Chelsea, if you can hear us, we see you're muted. Okay. And how about the other Marjorie Egger?
I am a retired hospice chaplain. And at the moment, serving on the, I forget what it's called.
PJC.
That's what it is. And I haven't done anything on that yet. And I'm hoping maybe I won't have to.
Amen.
I pray for no action. I pray for no action. That's
well,
great.
no misguided pastors anyway.
That's right. That's right. Thank you. Thanks, Marjorie. And how about you, Tom? Can you hear us okay? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I just did. Can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay. I'm a retired pastor also. I am commissioned as an interfaith peacemaker as of 2011 in this presbytery. I grew up here in Wilmington. and I am the present director of the Interfaith Veterans Work Group, whose mission is to prevent veteran suicide in the state of Delaware.
Wow. Thank you. Good stuff. It looked like we lost Chelsea. Did we lose Chelsea?
Oh, she's connecting to audio.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, we'll see if it happens. Magic. Chelsea, are you there?
Yeah, can you guys hear me now?
There you go. Perfect.
Great. Sorry, I'm in the car, and so I was trying to dial in, but it wasn't working. I'm Chelsea Spires. I am United Methodist clergy, but serving at Riverfront Ministries, which is one of Newcastle Presbytery's 1001 new worshiping communities.
Nice.
So serve as pastor and executive director. We primarily worship outside in pavilion on the Wilmington Riverfront. And then in addition to worship, one of our main ministries is that we have launched a kitchen incubator in the last couple of years. And so we operate now in two churches, having transformed their kitchen space into incubation space for small businesses. And so very grateful for the innovation dollars, both from the Presbyterian side of things and from the Methodists, have just the things that we have been trying over the last few years just wouldn't be possible without the support from both denominations in training and in funding, and just constantly trying to stay connected in both worlds. And so grateful for this call and just for more time with Newcastle Presbyterian.
That's so cool, Chelsea. Thank you for your ministry. And what a smart thing to get both denominations working for you. I love that. So thank you all for taking a minute for that. So what Cindy asked me to do is just introduce a little bit about the Presbyterian Mission Agency and about my role there, and then we can just have a conversation. Does that sound like what you guys are here for?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, I want you to know I still feel new. I feel new at the Presbyterian Mission Agency. I've been here for 1 year, started in February of 2022. And that was after, as Cindy mentioned, 15 years as the executive presbyter in the Northwest Coast Presbytery. Prior to that, I also served as a communications director for the Seattle Presbytery. And there may be some other pieces of that background that come out in our conversation. But one of the reasons why I wanted to share that a little bit about that background is that in the life of our presbytery, we had to go through I would say a process of recovering a sense of confidence and risk in God's future. And that involved being willing to launch and start new ministries. That would involved being willing to relate to each other in a fresh way. It involved being able to rebrand who we were and how we talked about ourselves and how we developed a consciousness about who the Presbyterians in this part of the world were. It required us it called us to merge with two presbyteries that were nearby who invited our mutual discernment with them. Which ended up creating what Cindy was talking about, this crazy geographic anomaly of a presbytery, where I think we're the only one that can claim we have a country and an ocean in between our presbytery. So we have Central Washington State, Northwest Washington State, and Southeast Alaska have come together to become the Northwest Coast Presbytery. And so one of the earlier times that Cindy and I got to talking to each other was when she was in Northern New England and Boston Presbytery. We had to, back in 2013, Northwest Coast Presbytery had to move to functioning in a today we would, we just throw around hybrid meetings like everybody knows what it is. In 2013, we wondered if that was some weird kind of genetic plant. So, back in 2013, we had to innovate and improvise. We had to become a hybrid Presbyterian. We met by video conference and in person regularly since then. And because of, what the geography, if you will, required us to do. I also love to brag that I got to be the person where 16 of our 55 churches, I got to either fly or go by ferry to. It was really fun. So that was pretty cool. And anyway, so then in 2020, late 2021, I began talking with the Presbyterian Mission Agency, which is one of our 6 national, international agencies of the Presbyterian Church USA. The others being probably some familiar names: the Office of the General Assembly, the Presbyterian Foundation, the Board of Pensions, the Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program, and the Presbyterian Publishing Corporation. So if you have any Presbyterian curriculum or have any Westminster John Knox Press books, then you know the Presbyterian Publishing Corporation. So we are one of those 6, shall we say, multinational agencies of the Presbyterian Church USA. So what I'd like to do is just give you a little sketch of the mission agency, kind of what our mission is and what our core priorities are, and then share a little bit about my particular role, and then we'll just open it up to conversation and engagement. To do that, I am gonna share my screen and share with you a few slides, if you don't mind. Here we go. So I think what you're getting is the slide, not the show. Hold on.
Yeah, the show is showing up.
Okay. There we go. Great. How's that? Do you look like a big blue screen with a Presbyterian Mission?
Big blue screen.
Perfect. Yep. Okay. Well, there we go. So we are, the Presbyterian Mission Agency, by the way, is in terms of who staffs it, we have about 75 people who work as mission co-workers all around the world. This picture happens to come from Costa Rica, but we've got people all around the world, and Newcastle Presbytery is a part of supporting many of our people all around the world. And we're so grateful that you participate together with our international denomination, and we participate together with you in this mutual mission of following Jesus, both in our own lives and into the world. And I just want to really say thank you for this partnership that we're a part of. And it's a really beautiful thing, and we value it and never take it for granted. And our purpose as a part of the overall constellation of agencies in the PCUSA is to really inspire, equip, and connect our mid-councils like presbyteries and synods, congregations, and our international partners who work with our mission co-workers as we engage in the gospel of Jesus Christ together. And our executive director is Reverend Diane Givens Moffett. She has been our executive director and president since 2018. She was just reelected in 2022 for another 4-year term. And she is amazing and fantastic and such an inspiring and visionary person to work with. And in my particular role, she's our executive director. I serve as a deputy executive director. So she's my boss. Direct, straight up, and I love it. She came most recently from Greensboro, North Carolina, as a pastor there for about 18 years to become the executive director for the mission agency. And we have identified the mission agency's sort of strategic priorities. The way we live out our purpose to inspire, equip, and connect is to follow God into the world, if you will, with our partners like you, in order to, and we call this set of strategic priorities, we call this Matthew 25 for short. Newcastle Presbytery has adopted, you are a Matthew 25 Presbytery, thanks be to God. And the core of this Matthew 25 set of strategic priorities is building congregational vitality, both for existing congregations who, they were there when we showed up or when you showed up. So, and this dimension of our work together is going to be kind of the centerpiece of the retreat next week. So we're going to be focusing on building the joyful marks of congregational vitality in Newcastle Presbytery. So this is one of those key things where our partnership is hand in glove. It's pretty cool. Another one is seeking to dismantle structural racism. Now, many of you we've talked about, racist attitudes and other things like that. We have adopted the desire and the hope and the audacity to say, those kinds of things that keep perpetuating racism generation to generation in housing, in medical issues, in poverty, in climate, in all of those ways in which racism has become an embedded part of our society. We want to work to shift that and build a different shalomified community, if you will. And by the way, you can ask me if you need to. I can, sometimes I make up words. So if you wonder what I meant, just feel free to ask. So, and the third key part of this work is seeking to eradicate systemic poverty. All of those things that help perpetuate haves and have-nots, all of those things that perpetuate, the 1% have 80% of the resources, all those things that keep people in poverty. We want to work together with all of our colleagues, mission partners, et cetera, to see if we can find a way to make a different sort of world in that regard. So these are sort of the three key strategic priorities that we sort of sum up as our Matthew 25 priorities. There are some additional ones that Cindy may have talked to you about over time. I'm not going to go into too much detail about those at the moment. So our vision is to inspire, equip, and connect congregations, people, mid councils, international partners, in order to help them build congregational vitality, which, by the way, I forgot to mention, a key component of building congregational vitality is giving birth to new ones, is the work that Chelsea is doing in new worshiping communities and new ministries and other things like that. That is a key part of developing congregational vitality, because presbyteries need new expressions of Christ Church the same way that an individual congregation needs new people to faith. It creates vitality, life, vibrancy, and a fresh set of eyes and perspective to look and see the transformative power of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thanks be to God. So this is, sorry, this slide is not working very well, but you can kind of get the flavor that in terms of those who have identified with Matthew 25, half of our presbyteries have, all of our synods have. So all of our synods that are programmatic synods, there are 13 synods. 2 of them, they have moved to what they call a reduced function synod, which basically means they're just an administrative agency. They have a PJC and probably a meeting once a year. So they don't do programmatic ministry, but 100% of our programmatic synods are Matthew 25. And about 12% of our congregations so far. We've got just over 8,000 congregations, and about 12% of them have identified as Matthew 25. And there's other groups like Presbyterian women, like our sister agencies, the foundation and the Board of Pensions and others. And like our colleges and universities that are associated with us that have said, we identify and we want to support and endorse this Matthew 25 movement as well, which is pretty cool. So now I'm going to move a little bit to why in the world am I part of the mission agency? So we developed a process whereby this started in 2020. When Diane became the executive director, we engaged in a visioning process that had 3 stages: reflect, reimagine, and rebuild. So we needed to reflect on who we were, how we have served well, how we have served poorly, what was working, what was not working, listening to you and a whole bunch of others to say, you know, how are we vital and aligned with what you're doing and how you're doing it, and where are we missing the boat, and how do we need to shift? And then we moved into a season of reimagining. Following that season of reimagining, which we basically mark as the end of 2021 was sort of the season of reimagining. And so by like November of 2021, we moved into a phase we called rebuilding, meaning, okay, we've reimagined how we can serve the church and our partners better. And now we need to rebuild this agency in order to do that well. So that's when the Presbyterian Mission Agency developed a position called Director of Rebuilding and Vision Implementation. So that's the word rebuilding doesn't make much sense unless you understand that that was part of this overall process. So rebuilding has to do with rebuilding the agency to serve effectively well and in partnership with you all. So they created this position called Director of Rebuilding and Vision Implementation. And the agency called me to serve in that role. And then 2 months in, we shifted it from, you know, it was intended to be like a 3-year project. And then we shifted it, and I was asked to serve as deputy executive for now vision, innovation, and rebuilding. So rebuilding is just one part of the overall engagement in ministry. How are we doing so far? Are you following? Are we there? I get thumbs up from Cindy. Others, are you still with me? Okay, cool. All right. So, and to give you a flavor for this, thanks, Nancy. I appreciate the thumbs up. To get a flavor for this, one of the ways I like to think about rebuilding, and I share this because, you know, Scott just shared they went through a PNC process, or was that one of you just shared? Yeah. You went through a PNC process. You probably did some vision engagement. You know, who are we? What are we about? And what do we want to do in the future as part of that? And congregations do that all the time. Presbyteries do that on a regular basis. The mission agency did as well. So this rebuilding is about helping the identity, mission, vision, and values that we discerned through that envisioning process saturate our strategic priorities and use of resources, saturate our actions and symbolic actions with our partner in the world, and infuse our organizational structure, our design, how we work together, and our organizational culture, which has that tacit dimension that we often don't name, but it is so profoundly shaping. So I've viewed that whole rebuilding phase, if you will, this 30-month period or so, as seeking to align all of these dimensions of who this agency is and how it functions in the world with that identity, mission, vision, and values. And coming out of that vision implementation process, there were 2 really key projects that the Presbyterian Mission Agency board said, we want to move on this. One of them, through the discernment process of the vision implementation season, they said, you know what? There has been a lot of instances in which the church has been part of, harm in the past, and we want to find a way to repair it. And specifically, it related to African Americans, the legacy of slavery, and structural racism. And Indigenous Americans, and the legacy of how white people mostly have interacted over hundreds of years with Native Americans, and different dimensions around that. And so knowing that we've been part of a legacy that has created harm in the past, we think following the gospel of Jesus Christ means this is reparable. Forgiveness is a thing. And being able to apologize and repair is possible. And so that was one of the new ministries that we've developed. Another new ministry is we realized that we needed to infuse all of ministry with innovation, featuring, and discernment. Not only the overall agency sense of direction, but any particular part of the agency. And in working with our partners, we wanted to be able to infuse innovation in our life together. Because the church tends to want to reproduce its sustainability and comfort more than it wants to innovate, experiment, and try the new things. And so we desire to balance that out a bit, if you will, through helping us pursue new visions and new possibilities. So in 2022, we were able to call Jermaine Ross Allam as the director for our Center for Repair of Historic Harm. And so we began that ministry in November of 2022. And Jermaine is a pastor who came out of the Twin Cities Presbytery in Minneapolis, St. Paul, was most recently doing his PhD. He's just about a doctor. He's through courses and exams. He's finishing up his dissertation from Union Seminary in New York on reparative social ethics. And it's amazing the work that he's done and the perspective that he brings. And we're just very excited about helping that happen. And then in addition, we are developing an Office of Innovation. Now, as we develop it, we're hoping that it will launch later in the summer of this year in 2023. One of we can talk a little bit more about this Office of Innovation if you want a little bit later. But one of the key dimensions is that we want to create a mobile anywhere innovation laboratory where we can bring a unique constellation of gifted people around a particular question or a particular problem or a particular hope that an individual or a group has, like a presbytery or like a congregation, for innovating in ministry. And we can bring a unique constellation of people, gifts, and perspectives around that question and help it gain some legs, gain a plan moving forward, and engage with them and follow through. Now, you are probably aware that there is a ministry that we developed back in 2012 called the 1001 New Worshiping Communities. Certainly that, and Chelsea is very aware of that, but certainly that that ministry is a part of innovating ways of being the church in the world, which is fabulous. But there's a lot of other things that are in need of looking at, identifying ways in which we can modify it so that it better serves the church in 2023 than it served the church in 1993 or even 2020. So we want to bring these competencies of innovation, processes that help innovation happen, and people who are particularly insightful and helpful innovators together to help the whole church innovate. And we know that as we do this, Stephen Johnson's really helpful insight through his book, How We Got to Now, is that when you're innovating, when you want new ideas and ways of being to emerge, it's got to emerge. It most often emerges not from an individual coming up with a good idea, but from collaborative networks at the intersections of people with different perspectives and different approaches to life and ministry. And that's where the most generativity bubbles up and happens. And so we're hoping that that Ministry of Innovation is going to help us gather these networks for the purpose of helping God's creation and recreation bubble up in our communities. So there's a lot more we could say about any one of those dimensions, but I'm going to stop sharing now. And I'd just love to ask you, what are you hearing so far that sort of has you curious, or what questions do you have, or wonderments are flying through your mind or heart?
Corey, can you hear me?
Sure can. Thanks, George.
Tom.
Oh, Tom, gotcha.
Yeah. We hear a lot these days about boomers and how there's going to be a big boomer bubble in the retirement community. How does that demography impact the mission of innovating?
Well, two things. One, there is a, shall we call it an insight of psychologists that says, as a person approaches more of the end of their life than the beginning of their life, they are less likely to want to try new things, experiment, innovate.
That's why I asked the question.
So my responses are twofold. One is, first of all, there are plenty of outliers to that overall psychological assessment. There are
Yes.
plenty of outliers, and I know that you know them, and you may be one of them.
Yes.
And thanks be to God. So there's that piece is really relevant. There's another thing that I think we haven't done enough of. And Debbie, I see your hand. I'll get to you in just a second. That I'd love us to think more about. And that is, and biblically, I look at Anna and Simeon in the Gospels. Now, you know, Anna and Simeon are these people who have been around the church for a long time. They're of an older generation, but they are consistently looking for, encouraging, engaging who's coming behind them. I mean, they're the ones who sort of celebrate that, oh gosh, we think this Jesus person is a thing.
Yep.
And I want us to grow the capacity for when, you know, people get to a phase of life where it's not them necessarily who are going to be the innovators, although it might be, when it's not them who are going to necessarily do that, that they are throwing their encouragement, they're throwing their energy, they're throwing their joy, and they're throwing their blessing to those who are. And find a way to do that in a, that this is the gospel ministry, to throw our blessing to those who are, to find a way to fuel those who are, and to be a part of what's going on is, I think two things. One, there's the, you know, to sort of summarize, there are plenty of outliers to the overall psychological rule. And secondly, there is a huge, huge blessing and purpose in blessing others who are innovating. Now, here's a pretty funky thing. I don't know if you know this, but there is a presbytery, San Fernando Presbytery in California, that right now has more new worshiping communities than they have existing congregations. And so this is a community that basically said, we're going to deliberately choose to put our prayer, our encouragement, and our money behind the new generation of innovators who are coming. And it's a pretty remarkable experiment. So if you ever want to learn more about it, Juan Sarmiento is the general presbyter there. He's fantastic. And it's quite an adventure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the great question. I hope that's helpful in some way. And Debbie, you had your hand up. And then I see yours.
There you
Mark.
go. Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here.
Aha. Well, then I'll just be quiet and you keep singing.
Everything you're saying is just dead on. I come from a congregation they've been in the church, some of them for as long as 50 years, and don't want to change anything. But wonder why we don't have more people in the church. So getting them to see that we're doing God's work, not just coming into the church to share apple strudel with each other, you know, that there's so much more to it. And sometimes it's like you're beating your head against the wall, but I keep beating. And I can't wait for this retreat. I mean, Cindy can tell you, this is right up what I need. And I'm
thanks
in
be to
an
God.
administrative commission right now that's working on the new life that we need to breathe into a church.
Yeah.
And it's lost its congregation and the church
Sure.
lost its way. So a lot of things I think will definitely help us as we discern where to go farther, and just pray to God that there's some mission that we can start in there to help the people.
Yeah. I also want to, Marge, keep your question fresh and good, because I want to, if you don't mind, Debbie, let me share just a thought that we can deepen our understanding of at a later time. But I think it's really, really important for us to start to develop a consciousness that we aren't the only game. And this 2 loops life cycle, are you seeing a thing that looks like 2 loops? Okay.
Yep.
Every incarnation of the gospel of Jesus Christ, every church, every presbytery, every denomination, is all of us are temporal.
Yep.
None of us live forever. The gospel might live forever, but the way in which we form and shape and move, etc., doesn't. And I think for so long we've had models of how an individual congregation or ministry develops, in incline, recline, and decline, that does not take into account where and when innovators are stepping back from that work, and where and when they are beginning to start innovating in ministry, and where and when those innovators influence the existing system to, in another way, and how this overall ecosystem continues to grow and develop over time. And I think we need to grow a more robust understanding of how this works, not just in our particular field of vision of the particular entity that we happen to serve, or as a ruling elder or teaching elder or whatever at, but in the whole ecclesial ecosystem, and find a way to support and encourage and develop those who we see less, but are innovating more. And one of the things we did as a presbytery was we had an outside person come. His name's Eric Samuelson. He came and walked us through this 2-loop model. And we had those people who were, the new worshiping communities leader down in the communities of practice area, and those who were, stepping out on what we call the line of delusion. I just love that part. And they were having this conversation between them about how essential and vital each of us is to one another in this presbytery, in this larger ecclesiology. And it's so cool to see how people come to recognize their participation in the larger whole. And it's not only about what we see week to week. It's pretty cool. Marge, go ahead.
Sorry.
We got you.
I am going to play the devil's advocate here, because you may be able to tell by my hair, I've been around a long time, and I've seen a lot of innovations and projects and new programs come and go. Mm-hmm. I don't want to speak for George, but George and I served on a group tackling racism in the area, in the Presbyterian, in the culture in general, for several years, and it was an extremely meaningful exercise for all of us that were in it. But at some point, you sometimes have to wonder what was the result of that, So I'm wondering, what is it that you're measuring here? What do you want to see happen, and how do we know if we did it?
Woo-wee. Bring it on, Marge. This is good. Okay. So thank you. It's a great question. First of all, I would want to say impact and outcomes are really important. And I think impact and outcomes need to be measured specific to each engagement. So in other words, I can't tell you a universal set of impact and outcomes, but you know, what Chelsea and this kitchen incubator is doing has a certain set of impact and outcomes it wants to see. What your racism group probably, you know, had a set of impact and outcomes it wanted to see. But I'm going to tell you something also true about the church, and forgive me, often about the Presbyterian Mission Agency, is we like to measure our activities more than our impact. It's like we want to measure how busy we are. Oh, we're so busy. Oh, we did this thing. Oh, we did this thing. We did that. You know, we had this event. We did all these things. We like to measure the activity we've done without paying attention to the impact and outcomes that get produced and that continue to live in the world through that activity. Does that make sense? We were just submitting a grant that said that asked for this program that was submitting the grant asked for, what are the outcomes of your project? And their answer was 18 retreats over a 2-year period. I mean, you know, my response is, those are great activities, but what is coming out of that? So this retreat next week, I'm going to ask you guys afterwards, what came out of this? What after effect did they have? What does that mean? So I actually think, Marge, what you're pointing to is a habit of innovation that we need to develop. And that is measuring, looking for, and foreseeing what outcomes and impact we hope to produce by what we do. But here's the other thing. We've also had an idolatrous relationship to sustainability for ministries. I mean, we often think the value of the ministry is how long it has lived to do the activities it does, rather than the impact that it has had on its people, and when it's ready to complete its ministry, to turn over its, the blessing that it has produced over the years to the next innovator. So we had a church in the Northwest Coast Presbytery called this Discovery Presbyterian Church, lasted for 5 years. It was, it happened between mid-90s and early 2000s. I didn't start until 2006, but when I started, we were stuck in wanting to do new worshiping communities because there was a psychological sense that people just kept asking, but what about Discovery Presbyterian Church? It started in 96 and then it closed in 2001. We failed. We can't do that anymore. I mean, this is sort of the unconscious thing going on in people's that actually became visible and conscious because people would actually say that. Well, you want to start a new ministry, but what about Discovery Presbyterian Church? Well, so we just kept tripping over it all the time. So here's what we did. We finally said, we're going to open it up. We're going to find out exactly what happened at Discovery. I and a colleague, we called together everybody we could find who was part of that project and through that 5-year period. And we brought them together for dinner. And we asked, what are you doing now? What's happening? What happened in that experience? We learned a lot in which our presbytery could have been more helpful to them in that experience. We learned a lot about, difficult, some people got burned out and it was a really difficult situation and didn't handle it well. We learned more about this room of 45 people, and 2 of 1 were continuing to serve in a congregation of some flavor, Presbyterian or otherwise, almost all of them in some kind of leadership capacity. And at least 30 of those 45 people said, we came to follow Jesus through Discovery Presbyterian Church. We're like, oh my God, this was not only not a failure, this might be the most fruitful congregation we've had in the last 40 years. So it's we got to look more at the impact and the outcomes of what happens rather than how long something lasts, if that makes sense. Chelsea.
Sorry, I put my hand down and didn't unmute myself. So I'm really struck. I've seen the 2 loops process in other places, not quite with the same language of innovation, but similar.
Sure.
And with this one, I was just really struck by the ways that innovation begins while the other system is on the incline, right? Which I think often we are waiting to innovate until the other system is on the decline and until things are wrong, right? So we are waiting to dream about the next phase of church when church is in trouble and in that decline, or maybe hospice. And now all of a sudden it's like, it really is do or die for a congregation, for a ministry. And as somebody in that innovation in lots of different phases of it, honestly, I feel like our worshiping community is in a different part of that cycle than our kitchen, than our first kitchen is in a different spot than our second kitchen. Like it's a messy curve. But I wonder just what are some of the questions and what is some of the space that we can hold while things are good to help keep that innovation alive, right? So in a local church, when a program or a mission or a whatever is going really well, how do we keep holding space for the what's next when it's really easy to just say, well, things are good right now. We can maybe take a break from asking the hard questions.
Wow. Ooh, I love Newcastle Presbyterians. Can I hang out with you more? So a couple of thoughts in response to that, Chelsea. One is part of the ministry of innovation that we're going to try to develop is not just the episodes of innovation, but the habits and ratios of energy that we can infuse into the life of our spiritual leadership and into the life of our congregations. Because it's been my experience that if you treat innovation as a project by project thing or episodic thing, like, well, let's innovate with this thing, rather than that innovation needs to become the competencies of doing so and the spiritual leadership orientation of ongoing innovation needs to become habituated, not just project. And so part of what we're doing is we're teaching, the core competencies of innovation. We're teaching the use of energy in a session meeting. We're teaching all of those things that create the habits to sustain ongoing, so that the loop continues to work. Now, I want to give you a recommendation to go watch. And it's just going to, it was so much fun. It blew my mind. Watch on Netflix. There's a series called 7 Days Out. So if Chelsea, I think you have this mind. If you kind of like thinking organizationally, this is a fascinating series. It looks at so big different events from the perspective of how do they pull this off in the week before it happens? Like they look at the Kentucky Derby, they look at the Paris Fashion Show, they look at the Westminster Dog Show, and they look at the opening of a restaurant called 11 Madison Park. But here's the fascinating thing. 11 Madison Park, two people bought this restaurant with the goal of becoming the best restaurant in the world. They got that award, best restaurant in the world, in 2017. And at the moment they're receiving the award over in Europe, they're saying to their team back in New York, they're saying, don't wreck the place while we're gone. We'll wreck it together when we get back. So the moment they're at their public highest, the time when they should be sitting on their laurels and letting things go because it feels comfortable and recline worthy, they are completely reinventing how they do what they do. And that is something that I think we have to recover as a habit. And it always requires the investment of spiritual leaders to make that a habit, because the whole will not want to go there.
Woo! We're at our hour, and I see Scott has his hand up. Welcome to stay on a little bit more. But I did want to say, yay, Corey!
And I need to check in with our theologians. Have been heretical in any place, shape, or form?
No. My thing has been that I came out here from a very large church in Kansas City, and to a church that my parents were charter members, and I find the congregation to be, we're too old. We don't have, this, that. We're doing well. We have a bunch of people that think negatively, about what's happening and how to get there. I've always been sort of an innovator, somebody that's on the, see something and want to do it.
Yeah.
And I've become the person not to listen to because I want them to get off of their butts and do something. For example, the church I was at was Village Church in Prairie Village. It was a very large Presbyterian church.
Yeah.
And when Bob Bowl was there, we started a thing called Back Porch Ministries or Porch Ministries. And we went over into the terrible slum area of Kansas City, Missouri, and started doing this front porch ministry where we'd go in and see what people needed in their homes, and we'd clean up neighborhoods. And we started with
awesome.
one, and before they got done, we had cleaned up 10 or 15. I mean, it just kept growing, and the people in the neighborhood started getting more involved in what they were doing and seeing what we would do and could do. And we got other people that saw that we were doing and started to volunteer their times and products to redo people's houses and take care of their yards. And, that congregation was fairly old in itself, but, we found people that wanted to do things and got it going. In fact, there were 3 ladies that started this front porch ministry that Bob Bull said, let's go with it. And, the church supported it and we went. Trying to get people to see that here is worse than pulling teeth. That there are things we could do to get more, to be more seen in the community, to get people to understand that we have a mission, that we're part of the Matthew 25 and what we're doing. It's nice to say that we are. It's much better to be doing something with it. Yeah. And that is my frustration.
I bet.
Right now.
Yep.
So I'm really excited about coming to this next.
Great. I have a lot to say about that, but I'm not going to say it right now.
Okay.
See, this is the stay tuned moment. So here's the amazing thing about our church friends. Corey and everybody in the Presbyterian Mission Agency and the Office of the General Assembly and our other sister agencies, they want us to be reaching out and saying, could you meet with our session? Could you do a session retreat day for the entire presbytery where we invite all the sessions to come together? So all it really takes is sometimes multiple emails, because there are a lot of emails in the world, but all it takes is that reaching out and saying, hey, Corey, this is amazing. How can we connect our whole session with you or somebody that can bring this information and spend some time with us? It's
Amen. Yeah.
And we're doing just that next week.
Expenses, they do that as part of their ministry. So we pay the expenses and they give us such great gifts. Yeah.
Well, I just got to say a big shout out to your presbyter, Cindy Coleman, and Tracy, because, you guys know, she was like the co-moderator of our whole enchilada for 2 years. Amazing. And I remember, do you remember that trip, Cindy, when you came out? Part of what was happening was you were thinking of doing that at that point, and then you did it.
It happened.
So thanks be to God for you and our partnership. I just love it.
Amen. So before we close out, first we want to say a big, big, big thank you to Corey for joining us tonight. Thank you for all you bring to the church, but also your willingness to join us for this little bit of time, this little taste.
Thanks for the welcome.
Yeah, definitely.
So cool. Let's do it again.
Yes, we can do that. And if I hear from folks that, hey, we would be interested, maybe we can find a central place and invite Corey to do kind of a day-long retreat, 4 sessions to talk about how do we learn the habit of innovation, to dig into that together. I would be more than happy to work on that with Corey and help that come to pass. He's also a friend, so I think he's amazing, and he's a friend. So more time with my friend is good stuff.
It's so mutual. Thank you.
Our next third Thursday will actually be on the third Thursday. So March 16th, again at 5 p.m. And this is part of what I intend to do this year, is to invite our partners in ministry. So I'm going to be reaching out to our other 2 deputy executive directors of the Presbyterian Mission Agency and seeing if they can come and join us one at a time during our third Thursdays. And from there, I want to introduce you to our program area directors, so you can learn more about these amazing resources that truly are at our fingertips, and learn more about everything our church has to offer for us here on the ground, as well as our neighbors across the world. So that's my plan moving forward. Third Thursday, March 16th, 5 p.m., right here at the Zoom link. Any last questions before we sign off?
Thank you, Corey. I look forward to hearing more next week.
I'm looking forward to seeing you all in person. What a treat.
Yes, it's
To
going
be at a meeting in person would be great.
And if you have not registered yet, and now you're like, oh, reach out to Donna. She can work magic, and we'll see what we can do. But we have almost 100 people registered for the retreat, so it's going to be a fantastic gathering. Yeah. Friends, be well. Enjoy life, celebrate, and look for those spaces where you can try something new, even if it's just a little thing each day. Make that a Lenten practice to try something new. It'll be good for your souls.
Amen.
Amen.